So what would you say is the best way for whatever it is you're ruminating about, whatever it is, as you said, you're obsessing, thinking about? How do you break free from that? What is the cleanest way?
So what I did, I just kind of had this. Well, first, what happened to me was I completely burned out. Like I was so focused on, because I couldn't be home, because every time I got home, I just would relive everything. And especially after I had found out about the cheating, it's like I would look at my couch and I would imagine him with somebody else on the couch. And I would look at my bed and be like, I wonder how many people were in here. It's just like,
Poor thing.
so I
That's
just
so
like,
hard.
I couldn't be home. So I have shared custody with my kids from a previous marriage. So if I didn't have my kids, I went home. Like,
Yeah.
and I had them half the week. So that was it. And the kids being there was the healthiest distraction when I was at home, because I could just focus on them. But I really did. I hit this point where I just was mentally and physically, I hit a wall. And like, dad got almost lost my job over it, because I exhausted myself. And I was fortunate enough to I worked for a small owned company. So I had a good relationship with the owner, and I was able to just tell him, like, look, I just need some time away. Like I need to escape. And so what I did was and I know not everybody can take an opportunity like this, but I essentially went out of town for 5 days by myself. I talked to my kid's mom. I was like, I really need to do this. She supported it. So I went. And during that 5 days, I just really didn't do a whole lot of anything. I just sat in this cabin that I was in, and I just started to journal every day. I had already been journaling semi-frequently up until that point, but I just started asking myself, what am I bitter about? I mean, it's kind of obvious, but I would start naming things like, what am I angry about? What am I bitter about? What am I harboring unforgiveness towards? And I just started naming all this stuff. And what I kind of started to realize was I had a lot of time and I had a lot of mental energy, but I was wasting it all on him. And
Yeah.
so I had this conversation with myself. I was like, if I have all this time and all this energy to be focused on what he's doing, what's he lying about, who's he doing this with, and where's he at, and blah, 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 that means I have all this extra time and energy. And now I have to teach myself how to reshift that energy back into myself and to take care of myself, which
Yes.
that process is hard in general, just because, especially for parents, like we have parent guilt if we want to do things for ourselves. That's just in general. I don't know why we feel that way, but we do. But when you're coming out of this kind of a relationship, we aren't allowed to take care of ourselves, because we're always supposed to be taking care of them and babying them and, meeting their needs. And I have worked with countless people that I coach that have said that they struggle working out because every time they wanted to go to the gym, it's, well, who are you going to the gym for? You got me. Like, why? Or just there's
Yep.
always some kind of negative connotation that happens to things when you're taking care of yourself. And
Right.
so the first thing you have to do, or for me, was I had to give myself permission to take care of myself. And my therapist introduced me to this concept called the wellness wheel, which is the traditional wellness wheel is about having a balanced life. So it's about your financial life, your spiritual life, your work life. It's about having a balanced life. And for some reason, when she was teaching this concept to me, it made me think about a balanced practice of self-care. A lot of times we have like that one thing that we do, that one thing we give ourselves permission to do. So whether it's like a gym membership, or like I'm from the South, so tanning's a big thing. So like tanning memberships, or, we go and get our nails or our hair done once a month. We usually have one thing that we allow us to do that feeds into ourselves.
Hmm.
Well, the problem with that is, what if something happens to that one thing? What if you call to make a hair appointment and they don't have anything for 4 more weeks? What if you show up to your tanning salon and they're under construction? What if you get to the gym and the pool has a leak, or whatever? And sometimes what we can find is we have these exaggerated responses to where a minor inconvenience turns into this huge meltdown. And it's
Yeah.
because that's the only thing. That's it. That's all we've got for ourselves. And so this practice that I started to do with myself was kind of redefining what self-care meant to me. And so that meant that My spiritual life was part of my self-care. Working out is part of my self-care. Spending quality time with friends is part of my self-care. Spending quality time with my family is part of my self-care. Dating can be part of my self-care as long as it's not the main part of my self-care. Because again, if I get ghosted, that's going to have a huge exaggerated response because that's the thing these days, ghosting. It's ridiculous. So
I know it.
It really is. I created a spreadsheet where it was like Monday through Sunday, and then it had the different areas. So like my physical health, my mental health, spiritual health, quality time with friends, quality time with family, and dating. And I would just fill in at the end of every day. I would fill in like, what areas did I do something to take care of me today? I never expected to fill every area out, but I just would fill in. And it was anything. Like if I did my nighttime skincare routine, I gave myself credit for that. Because I mean, we'll go days without doing something like that just because we don't have the energy. So if I did that, I would celebrate that. If I did a workout, I would write that down. If I spent quality time, if I did intentional quality time with my children, like sat down on the floor, played a board game, we did a movie night or something, I would count that. And I would literally fill in everything. And I would do that every day. And at the end of the week, I would look back and see how balanced was I in my self-care? Did I hit every area at least once this week? And I would start to see patterns of like what areas of self-care were more efficient, like what fills my cup the fastest. So like working out is one of those for me, and quality time with my kids is one of those for me. But I can go a little bit longer without doing quality time with friends. So, you know, you kind of I learned these patterns about myself, and I literally did this practice for 6 weeks straight. By the end of that 6 weeks, I went no contact with my ex. I was not completely healed, but my trauma bond was definitely broken. I did not feel angry. I could talk about the situation without having this, again, exaggerated emotional response. I could talk about how he cheated and it wouldn't make me cry anymore. And I just felt indifferent towards my ex. I wasn't mad at him. I didn't hate him. I didn't love him. I actually didn't care. And I ended up writing a workbook that was that exact practice. It's called the Wellness Wheel Journal. And it's literally the exact process that I did. And no matter what you are doing, this, like what gets you to start doing this practice of self-care, having a balanced practice and redefining that self-care is not just going out and spending a bunch of money on massages and facials and like, that's just great. But that's society's view of self-care. Like self-care is the small daily tasks that you do on a regular habitual basis that tells your subconscious, I am worth taking care of. And that's what self-care should be. And that's kind of what the workbook teaches.
That's amazing. And so by doing that, and of course, there's no time limit on when grief should be healed or, you know, when someone should be at a certain point in their healing journey. But it's nice that you gave yourself 6 weeks. Just the outcomes that you saw in that you shifted the obsession from what is going on in his world to what's going on in my world.
Right.
And that's beautiful because, you know, some people can say, well, that makes me very selfish or makes me a narcissist. It, you know, puts my ego on a pedestal and, oh, I just did one thing for me. But it's like, but if you don't pay attention, and I'm really big into health. So if you don't pay attention to what it is you're eating, but you just think that you're eating well, and then you count it out for the day, you're like, holy crap, that was like 3.5 grams of carbs and I didn't realize it, right? And you may be thinking, I do enough for myself. I watched an episode of this or I folded a sock or whatever the case is.
Right.
If you were to really write down, I think the opposite would be true. Like you're going to see how much you aren't loving yourself in ways that you could be. And I love that I wrote down a couple of things as you were talking, that you were redefining what self-care means. And you're right, because it's not just like tanning beds and bubble baths. It can be a plethora of things on a whole different bunch of scales of that wheel. And I think that that's a good shift of focus because it does involve family. It does involve your kids. It does involve friends. It does involve me time to where you are still putting you first, but it's including everyone else. And so I think that is a fantastic shift in focus, which does help break free from that rumination cycle. Because just like with anything, if all you're focused on is eating 100 calories, if you're just focused on the calories, your macros could be crazy horrible. right? You need to look at every single thing. You need to look at the fats and the proteins and the carbs and the calories, and you need to make sure they're all balanced.
Yeah.
In order for it to be effective.
Yeah.
So I think that that is a beautiful example. And I love that you use the word indifferent, because I feel like oftentimes when anyone splits from their abuser, from their narcissistic abuser, there is a lot of hate, or it's the opposite. There's still so much love for them that they still aren't willing to face the hard stuff. And so it's like, well, I don't want to report them that they hit me, or I don't want to report them that this happened, because I still care for them. And when you get to the point where you're like, what they did is on them and there's consequences for actions, and how that goes to the rumination cycle is because the whole time you're caring and caring and caring about their feelings and their job and their status quo and in their life. And that's still a form of rumination where we're so afraid of messing up their life. But it's like, okay, pump the brakes. So I think no matter what it is, if the listeners, and what I coach my clients too, is if we're able to put a pause on something that doesn't feel right, like as soon as you can feel your gut tell you that something's off, jot that down. Jot down what it is that you're giving you that signal. Because then, like you were mentioning, you can just start identifying patterns and behaviors of when you're feeling your central nervous system get a little shaken up and you're feeling this happen. And when you do that, you can start figuring out what it is that you need to start breaking free from.